we will see that how that statutory definition is similar to or different from any of the senses in which the word evidence is often used, something that we have already discussed. So when you look at the definition in section 3, that is interpretation clause, time and again I keep repeating, of Indian Evidence Act, you find that there are two clauses. The first refers to what is known as oral evidence, the other refers to what is known as documentary evidence, and that's all that this statutory definition, this formal definition of evidence talks about. So again a second reading, because we already had the first reading in the last class. That was the last thing that I had done when we had met last. Evidence means and includes all statements which the court permits or requires to be made before it by witnesses in relation to matters of fact under inquiry. Such statements are called oral evidence. This is what we had seen. And all documents, including electronic records produced for the inspection of the court, and such documents are called documentary evidence, is the closing sentence. So from this definition that you have, the statutory definition, you gather that evidence means and includes two categories. One, which we call oral evidence, and this oral evidence consists of statements made by witnesses in the court in relation to matters of fact under inquiry. And the second category, that is documentary evidence, that consists of what we call documents, including electronic records produced for the inspection of the court. And the crucial question, that important question which we need to take up at the very outset, is that whether the definition is an exhaustive one, whether it is an exhaustive one, whether it exhausts the categories and kinds as far as evidence is concerned. And I have told you that yes, of course it is, and the same has been reiterated, has been endorsed in a category of decisions. Reference may be made to this Hardeep Singh versus State of Punjab, this decision of the Supreme Court of 2014, where the Supreme Court has held the obvious, has said the obvious, that the definition of the word evidence under the Indian Evidence Act is exhaustive, which means, and what is the meaning, what is the significance that it is exhaustive, which means that as far as the Indian Evidence Act and its scheme is concerned, there are no categories other than oral and documentary evidence. No categories. I repeat, other than oral and documentary evidence. Now this statement needs some elaboration. Why this statement needs some elaboration? Because in our discussion on different aspects of principles and rules of evidence, we would be often using the term evidence with a variety of prefixes. Variety, innumerable. So how far is this statement true that there are no categories other than oral and documentary evidence? What about the other varieties and other kinds that you find mentioned in all sort of legal literature, academic and judicial? And then this is exactly what was also observed by the Supreme Court in another interesting decision. That is Kalyan Kumar Gogoi versus Ashutosh Agnihotri. Kalyan Kumar Gogoi versus Ashutosh Agnihotri. This is a 2011 decision of the Supreme Court, AIR 2011, Supreme Court 760, wherein the Supreme Court observed that though in the definition of the word evidence given in section 3 of the Indian Evidence Act, we find only oral and documentary evidence. And this is something that I already told you. This word evidence, this phrase evidence, is also used in other phrases. For example, best evidence, circumstantial evidence, corroborative evidence, derivative evidence, direct evidence, hearsay evidence, for example, indirect evidence, for example, oral evidence, that is, of course, enumerated in the definition. Original evidence, for example, presumptive evidence, for example, primary evidence, for example, secondary evidence. Then this phrase substantive evidence, and of course, more importantly, real evidence. So what are these words? What are these phrases? Aren't these the other varieties which section 3 of the Indian Evidence Act does not talk about? So how far is this statement correct that the definition of the word evidence in section 3 of Indian Evidence Act is an exhaustive one, and there are no other categories than oral and documentary? What about the real evidence? Real evidence is not an antonym to imaginary evidence. No. shouldn't be understood in that sense, in that manner. Then words like substantive evidence, in your CRPC you would be looking into this question, that whether FIR is a substantive piece of evidence or not. Even if not going into detail, of course, any book that you lay your hand on CRPC in the context of section 154 must have a para at least on this question, that whether FIR is a substantive piece of evidence or not. Same goes for the statement that is recorded under section 161 of CRPC, the statement that is recorded by the police, or for that matter the statement that is recorded by the magistrate under section 160, 164. Questions that whether these statements constitute what we call substantive evidence. And then another phrase that we often use is circumstantial evidence. Another, that is corroborative evidence. These are at least the ones that you would be very frequently using. And of course, that rule, which is an overarching rule, the rule of best evidence or the doctrine of best evidence. What is this best evidence? What evidence is best? Whether it is oral evidence or documentary evidence or a third category which the Indian Evidence Act fails to recognize. And not only fails to recognize, doesn't leave a scope for its recognition, because the judicial interpretation has been that it's an exhaustive definition. So a few academic commentators on law of evidence, they are of this view that use of the term includes in section 3 is indicative of the fact that it's only an inclusive definition. And not an exhaustive definition of evidence. This is what you would find in a few commentaries that you may be reading. But let me tell you that why this statement is not correct statement. Because section 3 not only uses the word includes, it also uses means and includes. Means and includes. So when you find the word includes in any definition, certainly that is only an inclusive definition and not exhaustive one. But when it is qualified by the word means and includes, it becomes an exhaustive one with its doors closed, where no other words and phrases would have an opportunity to enter. So they have said that how could it be a closed definition, exhaustive one, when one important kind of evidence that it doesn't expressly mention and is often considered by the court is not part of that definition. How could it be exhaustive? And while making this assertion, they refer to what is known as material or real or objects. Material evidence or real evidence or what we call objects. So take an example of a suicide case being looked into by the court. Or an unnatural death case, that would be more apt statement to make, where the court has to decide that whether it is homicide or suicide. So there may be, say for example, documentary evidence, any document, that would be, we will see that what documentary evidence means in fact. There may be oral evidences, oral testimonies, but at the same time there may also be what we call real or material or objects that are produced as evidence before the court. A bottle of poison, for example, or a rope that was allegedly used by the deceased or by someone else to hang the deceased, to portray that as suicide case, or a weapon that was allegedly used by the weapon, murder weapon. So these words, material evidence, real evidence or objects, these refer to things like knives, pistols, murder weapons, blood soaked clothes, blood stains, and obviously material evidence or the real evidence is neither oral nor documentary. Even Sir James Stephen was confronted with this question. He was asked that why did he think it appropriate to omit this category of evidence, and he has tried to answer that in the very year in which the Indian Evidence Act was enforced. And he said that yes, a third class might be fond of things produced in courts which are not documents, such as instruments with which the crime was committed or the property, for example, to which damage has been done. But he said that this division would introduce, and this is his rationale for excluding real or material evidence from the definition. He said that this division would introduce needless intricacy into the matter. And he said that it was essential to distinguish between oral and documentary evidence. Because in many cases the existence of the documentary evidence excludes the employment of the former, that oral evidence. But the condition of material things other than documents are also material, of course, though electronic records are also included in the term documents, as we would be knowing and elaborating. Condition of material things other than documents is usually proved by oral evidence. Gun may be produced for inspection of the court, but whether it is the same gun that was used, say for example, in committing murder or in committing suicide, can be proved only by introducing oral evidence, oral testimony of the expert. Ballistic experts, say for example, forensic experts, say for example. But then you would find that even documents are also proved by oral evidence. It's not that you adduce a document as an evidence and that document is taken on its face value and is believed and is acted on as an evidence. Often you would find that there would be documents which are contested and their content has to be proved. How do you prove the content? You prove the content of a document by oral evidence. How do you prove that the gun that has been produced in the court for its inspection is the same gun that was used in the crime? You prove that by oral evidence. How do you prove that a certain document on which one of the parties relies is a genuine one or has the same terms and conditions as asserted? You will find that even documents, their content is proved by oral evidence. Not only that, you would be aghast to know. As a practitioner, you would be surprised to know. As a judge, you would be surprised to know that often even the FIRs are contested. FIR भी prove करना पड़ता. What is meant by proving an FIR? That FIR was registered is a fact that doesn't need any proof. A lot of documents would be available. The FIR itself, you would be studying the manner in which FIR is registered, and after that Young Lawyers Association case, it's now mandatory to upload the FIR on the state government's portal, meaning thereby not only the physical copy of FIR is there in the Thana, but also its digital copy uploaded, barring a few exceptional cases where the name of the victim and her identity should not be disclosed. That CCTNS system is in vogue in most of the states, including the state of UP. So that FIR was registered may not be a contested a disputed issue, may not be a fact that needs proof. But as far as content of the FIR is concerned, content has to be proved. And content can only be proved by oral testimony. The complainant would be called. Did you go and lodge an FIR? Yes, I went to the police station and got an FIR lodged. Is this the FIR that you got lodged? Is this what you had alleged in your complaint? He may say yes, he may say no. And this is how even that document, that FIR, which forms part of the charge sheet, would be proved or disproved. So even documents are proved by oral evidence, as you would be seeing, you would be experiencing in the classroom and beyond that. So Sir Stephen went on to rationalize this exclusion. That it may be said that in strictness all evidence is oral. All evidence is oral. As documents or other material things must be identified by oral evidence before the court can take notice of them. But he said that it's unnecessary to discuss. The point of this criticism, as the phrase documentary evidence is not ambiguous and is convenient and in common use. This is what he said. But many believe that the definition would have been a better one had it expressly mentioned the category of material evidence. So how do we reconcile these conflicting ideas? You'd find that section 60, that would be taken up later, it refers to material objects. Stephen referred to material objects in section 60 in the context of the production of objects to which oral evidence relates. But it was then in 1872, at the time of drafting of the Indian Evidence Act, guns, bullets were not in vogue as widely as they are now. More modern electronic and other gadgets were unknown as tools and instruments of crime. And in the present contemporary crime scenario, material or real evidence cannot be viewed as merely an object or thing on par with paper document to which oral evidence relates. And there is one school of thought that believes that it should be treated as an independent third category of evidence because of its critical importance, and should be expressly brought under the scheme, under the scope of the so-called inclusive definition of evidence under section 3 of Indian Evidence Act. But that's not all. You would find that the chapter on relevancy in the Indian Evidence Act, the next chapter that we are going to discuss, it declares certain facts as relevant under its different sections. For example, dying declaration under section 32 clause 1, dying declaration, and confession of the co-accused under section 30, which fall in none of the two categories that section 3 talks about. None of the two categories. Why so? Because these facts can be relevant only when certain conditions are met. Certain other conditions are met. And it's not all. You would also find that CRPC, I told you that rules of evidence are to be found beyond the rubrics of Indian Evidence Act as well. CRPC, it also declares that reports of government experts may be used as evidence. Government experts. If the question is that whether a certain currency note is genuine or fake, you would find that the law talks about a certain manner in which this can be done by adducing expert testimony. Then we had referred to, you may remember, section 296. Evidence of formal character may be offered on affidavit and may be read in evidence. The statements that is recorded by magistrate under section 164. is sent to the magistrate who tries the case and is read in evidence. So what I have been trying to say is that section 3, which doesn't allow a third category in its present form, requires a little fine tuning and must be changed, must be amended, must be modified to make room for this third category of evidence, which you would find in most criminal trials as the most important category, where it must be treated independently and not as something that falls in the two categories that are the only categories which the Indian Evidence Act today permits.